What if everything you're doing to impress a woman is quietly pushing her away? For years, men have been sold a silent lie, a lie taught by culture, movies, and well-meaning advice. That being nice, emotionally available, endlessly understanding, always accommodating is the formula for attraction. That if you adapt more, give more, validate more, you'll win her heart. But that's not how attraction works. It never has. This approach doesn't create desire. It creates exhaustion. And worse, it gets perceived as weakness. Modern men are trapped inside an emotional illusion. They confuse sacrifice with value. They believe the more they give to a woman, the more she'll love them. They believe avoiding conflict means stability. They believe agreeing with everything keeps the peace. They believe shaping themselves around her emotions builds connection. But in reality, they are slowly abandoning their center, and a man without a center becomes invisible. Machiavelli never wrote about love, but he understood human nature. Power is not begged for. Power is communicated, not through words, through behavior. Every time a man explains himself just to avoid discomfort, he loses ground. Every time he prioritizes external validation over internal direction, he becomes ungrounded. Every time he acts from fear of losing instead of confidence in who he is, he becomes replaceable. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Women don't disconnect because you give too little. They disconnect because you give everything without structure. Overgiving doesn't create affection, it kills tension. And without tension, there is no desire. Machiavelli would say this: respect is not earned through compassion, it is earned through the perception of strength. Not physical strength, emotional strength, structural strength, psychological stability. This strength is felt in what a man does not say, in what he does not negotiate, in how he stands when things get uncomfortable. A man who operates from fear of loss is already lost because he has handed over the center from which his behavior should be governed, and that absence is felt. A woman doesn't logically analyze it. She senses it, instinctively, biologically, in your walk, in your decisions, in your tone, in your response when something goes wrong, and most of all, in how you hold yourself when she tests the edges of your emotional presence. Because the test always comes. Sometimes as a small disagreement, sometimes as distance, sometimes as silence. And in that moment, the man who wins is not the one who pleases. The man who wins is the one who remains, the one who does not reshape his essence to keep attention. Here is the brutal paradox. The less you try to be chosen, the more choosable you become. The more you try to please, the less impact you create. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're operating from a frame Machiavelli would call naive, a frame where the other person senses that you need approval more than you need your own center, and that kills attraction. Treating a woman well does not mean giving everything. It means knowing what not to give. It means choosing when to act, when to hold, when to allow emotional space to breathe. Machiavelli taught that a ruler should not fear conflict, but understand it. The same applies to relationships. A man who gives himself away without maintaining direction loses the only thing that truly attracts: his center. Desire does not grow from comfort. Desire grows from the perception of power. Machiavelli wrote for princes, not lovers, but hidden inside his strategies of rule is the rawest map of how human attraction actually works. He didn't talk about flowers. He didn't talk about romance. He talked about perception, control, timing, behavioral intelligence. Without realizing it, he described the invisible pattern that triggers female desire at a level almost no modern man understands. A woman doesn't desire a man because he's perfect. She desires him because he radiates power without asking permission. And that power is not domination, it is emotional structure, direction, internal clarity. Attraction is not logical. It is an instinctive reading of a man's inner state. And what the female nervous system looks for is not a supplier of positive emotions, but a reference point. A man whose presence alone regulates the emotional climate. A man whose silence communicates more than others' long speeches. Machiavelli said, "Men judge more with their eyes than with their intelligence." In relationships, this means women respond more to how they feel in your presence than to what you say with your mouth. And if what they feel is anxiety, neediness, or uncertainty, no matter how noble your intentions are, attraction does not form there. Attraction is born from inner calm, from emotional predictability, from stable presence. Many men try to be loved before they have built respect, and respect is not moral, it is biological. It is the silent recognition that you are facing a man who does not collapse under pressure. Without that respect, Everything you give is interpreted as emotional noise, as hidden neediness, as a desperate desire to be chosen, and that doesn't seduce, it exhausts. Female desire does not respond to effort, it responds to structure. It does not react to words, it reacts to presence. And presence is born when a man decides to stand firm, even in rejection, even in disagreement, even in uncertainty. Machiavelli was not writing about couples, he was writing about the art of ruling. And inside his lines is the harsh truth. The one who governs is not the kindest. The one who governs is the one who understands the game and controls the rhythm. A woman is not attracted to a man who asks permission to move forward. She is attracted to a man who moves from the solidity of his center, not because she wants to be controlled, but because her biology needs to know if this man can emotionally hold himself in a world that changes without warning. That is why when a man over-explains, when he apologizes for feeling, when he constantly asks for validation, the perception breaks. And Machiavelli already warned us. The appearance of virtue matters more than virtue itself, not because you should be fake, but because perception defines the game. If you project insecurity, even if you are noble, you will be discarded, because biology does not reward intentions, it rewards signals. A woman does not rationalize this. She feels it. She reads it in your pauses, in your breathing when conflict appears, in your body language when you're challenged, in your tone when something doesn't go as planned. If you collapse in those moments, it doesn't matter how attentive you were before. Desire does not survive the fracture of the masculine center. Because desire requires tension, and tension only exists where there is firmness. The men who generate the most attraction are not cold, they are centered, they are not distant, they are unshakable. They transmit a feeling that's hard to explain, but impossible to ignore. I am here. I don't need you to love me, but I will not lose myself to please you. When that state is embodied, the entire dynamic changes. Female desire activates when she senses that a man can lose without breaking, can be present without invading, can choose without justifying. Machiavelli understood this. He said, "A ruler must be loved or feared, but never ignored." In modern relationships, many men become invisible because they seek approval. Attractive power is not aggressive. It is silent. It is the ability to hold eye contact without looking away, to say no without fear of loss, to choose when to speak and when to stay silent without anxiety. And none of this is acted, it is built, because the respect that matters is not the respect you demand. It is the respect the other person cannot avoid feeling. This is not about being desired, it is about being read as valuable. One of the biggest mistakes men make is assuming respect comes from being good. But respect is not an automatic result of morality. It is the effect of positioning. And positioning, as Machiavelli would say, is strategy. Seduction is not manipulation. Seduction is directed perception. It is understanding that everything you do and everything you don't do communicates. And in the emotional realm, the one who does not lead becomes a burden. Machiavelli wrote that human nature changes very little over time, and that is the key to understanding attraction today. The basic rules haven't changed, only the costumes. The internal structure that awakens desire is still the same: clarity, direction, emotional power. Seduction does not begin with what you say, it begins with what you allow the other person to intuit about you. Selective mystery, narrative control, strategy. When a man reveals everything, he becomes predictable. And what is too predictable stops being attractive, because desire needs room to breathe, and breathing requires tension. Tension disappears when there is no rhythm, when everything is exposed without pause, without restraint. Respect is not earned through insistence, it is earned through rarity, through not being available all the time, through not reacting to every stimulus, through maintaining internal focus while the environment shifts. Machiavelli would say that a true ruler does not reveal all of his thoughts, only what is necessary, because mystery is not avoidance, mystery is power. The same thing happens in the emotional realm. The man who does not rush to define himself, who does not unload his entire world immediately, who does not panic trying to prove his worth, creates healthy tension, and that tension becomes desire. Do you want to know why many men get discarded right after being labeled a nice guy? Because they misunderstood something fundamental. Attraction is not built on being good, it is built on being strong. And strength is not performed, it is constructed. With strategy. Strategy is not playing games. Strategy is clarity about how power dynamics work in relationships. If you adjust yourself to every emotional movement of the other person, you surrender leadership. And when a man surrenders emotional leadership, he transfers the weight of the relationship onto the woman. That does not create connection, it creates exhaustion. Machiavelli would write that this type of man is unfit for power, and in relationships, the man who cannot hold emotional structure is quickly replaced. So how do you earn respect? With clear decisions. Do not ask if every choice is okay, decide, observe, adjust if necessary, but decide first. Speak with restraint. Do not explain more than required. Excessive justification communicates insecurity. Stay calm without anxiety. Remain where others collapse. Stand firm where others beg for approval. Speak with clarity of intention. Do not say what you think she wants to hear. Say what is true for you and allow her to feel it over time. Not everything has to be resolved in one day. Desire needs pauses, space, mystery, control the emotional rhythm. And above all, maintain coherence between what you say and what you do. A man who talks about confidence but acts from fear destroys his image in seconds, because the body always betrays the truth. And Machiavelli knew this. The appearance of virtue must be cultivated, but it must be supported by action. Your words are only worth what your behavior backs up. And respect is born when your actions say, I am not here to please, I am here because I chose to be, but not at any price. That energy is felt, it spreads. It becomes a kind of invisible magnetism, because she does not feel that you are trying to get something from her. She feels that you are busy being yourself, and that self has direction. Seduction is strategic because it is not rooted in need, it is rooted in presence. Machiavelli would speak of conquest, but here, this is not about conquering a woman, it is about conquering your internal structure. Becoming a man who does not chase because he has built himself, because he has organized his world, because he is not looking for a mirror. He is looking for reciprocity. And to understand this even better, think about this. Imagine two men on a date. The first one tries to fill every silence with words. He smiles nervously. He apologizes for telling a story that was too long. And when the woman doesn't react with enthusiasm, he asks, "Is everything okay?" The second man listens calmly. He speaks only when he has something clear to say. He does not justify himself. And if silence appears, he holds it, comfortably. He does not react. Now ask yourself, which one do you think the female body perceives as more attractive? Not the one who tries harder, the one who holds more. Because holding is power, and power expresses itself in silence. Respect is not born from avoiding conflict. Respect is born from how you behave inside conflict. A fatal mistake modern men make is confusing presence with physical availability. They think that being close, replying fast, always being attentive, creates connection. It doesn't. True presence is not quantity, it is emotional quality. It is the ability to hold the space when tension appears, to remain whole when something shifts, to not collapse in discomfort. Machiavelli never wrote about love, but he left a crucial principle. The stability of power is measured by resistance to chaos, and that is exactly what women observe, often without realizing it. Is this man stable when things tighten, or does he need everything to be okay in order to function? The masculine center is not something you say, it is something that is felt, and it reveals itself most when there is friction. Friction is not the enemy. Friction is the stage where your structure is tested. Many men run from disagreement. They give in. They get uncomfortable. They change their position when the emotional climate gets dense. And in doing so, they lose. Not because they did something morally wrong, but because they demonstrated that their center depends on the environment. A woman doesn't want constant fighting, but she does need to know if the man beside her can hold the storm. That reading is not conscious, it is biological. It activates when she raises her tone, when she challenges an idea, when she tests direction. Machiavelli taught that the one who cannot hold power will be replaced by the one who can. And in relationships, this happens every day. The man who cannot tolerate tension loses attraction. So what is the center? It is what does not move even when everything else does. It is your ability to think clearly under pressure. Your ability to say no without anxiety. The tone you maintain when the other person wants to know, are you performing or are you actually this? And here another critical element appears. Mystery. Mystery is not hiding. Mystery is not overgiving. It is allowing the other person to discover you without you explaining yourself. Desire needs air, and air disappears when you occupy every space with explanations, with anxiety, with need. Mystery is a form of emotional leadership. It is knowing when to step back, when to be silent, when to let the other person feel instead of telling them what to feel. Machiavelli would speak here about the art of not being fully decipherable, of not allowing someone access to your entire kingdom until they have earned it. Because what is obtained without effort is discarded without guilt. Many men lose all attractive tension the moment they become completely readable, too available, too correct, too predictable. The opposite of desire is not rejection. The opposite of desire is excessive comfort. When mystery disappears, desire goes into sleep mode, because there is nothing left to discover. And where there is no discovery, there is no tension. So what is tension? It is the small space between what is visible and what has not yet been revealed. It is anticipation, the emotional field where the other person wants more, but does not get everything. This is not about playing games. It is about not dissolving yourself. A man with presence can be silent without feeling threatened. He does not need to explain his value. He does not sell himself. He expresses himself with rhythm. That is the difference between being present and having presence. Having presence means having impact without shouting, creating attraction without asking for attention, being remembered without insisting. And this is not achieved with phrases. It is achieved with center, with emotional control, with the ability to hold your own value even when the other person questions it. When a woman says, "You've changed," many times what changed was this. The man lost his mystery. He lost his center. He became flat, predictable. And desire, like power, needs limits, needs tension, needs silence, needs real presence, not constant interaction. Machiavelli would have said, "Do not display all your power, show only what is necessary to maintain structure." In relationships, that advice is gold. Do not act to hold the connection, hold yourself, and the connection will form naturally. The mistake is not ignorance. The mistake is denying how humans actually function. Many frustrated men keep searching for the perfect line, the flawless strategy, the magic technique to be desired, but that search is a symptom, not a solution. The symptom of not having understood something fundamental. Attraction is not conquered. Attraction is allowed, and to allow it, you must understand human nature. Machiavelli was never an idealist. He did not write about how things should be. He wrote about how things are. And that is the difference between the man who connects and the man who fantasizes. One reads reality, the other denies it. In love, as in power, the one who wins is not the one who wants it more. It is the one who understands the system better. And the female emotional system does not respond to effort. It responds to signals, not to what you offer, but to how you embody it, not to your speech, but to your structure. Many men act with nobility, but with a vibration of lack. They give from anxiety, they listen from fear, they compromise to avoid conflict, and they do not see that this pattern carries something the female body reads as instability. A woman is not looking for you to conquer her. She is looking for you to read her, to know when to move forward, when to step back, when to hold the space. And that cannot be memorized. It is felt, it is developed. The mistake is trying to apply fixed rules to a constantly moving emotional system. Machiavelli anticipated this. He said, Whoever governs without understanding the nature of the people is destined to fail. Here, the people is emotional dynamics, and if you don't understand how it flows, what you try to control will turn against you. A woman may say she wants a good man. That does not mean she wants a man without a center. She may say she wants honesty. That does not mean she can hold that honesty if it isn't supported by structure. And this is where many men fail. They take words literally, but they don't read subtext. Emotional reading is more important than any technical skill, because that reading allows you to adapt without losing yourself, to hold space without invading, to preserve your center without disconnecting from the other person. You cannot control what a woman feels, but you can observe how she responds. And if you observe carefully, you will always know what to do. Not because of magical intuition, but because you understand biology. Female desire is not chaotic. It is highly structured by evolutionary necessity. If you project emotional ambiguity, anxiety, insecurity, the female nervous system reads it as a threat, not because you are wounded, but because you do not inspire protection. You do not hold structure. Respect is not born from being liked. Respect is born from emotional coherence, from stable rhythm, from silent firmness. Machiavelli would call this strategic realism, seeing what is, not what you wish it were. Think of it like an emotional chessboard. You cannot move pieces based on impulse. You read the board, you sense intentions, you anticipate, without revealing your next move. That is strategic seduction, a dance between perception and pause. If she pulled away after you opened up, it wasn't because you were vulnerable. It was because your vulnerability had no backbone. You didn't show yourself, you gave yourself. Showing is power. Giving yourself without filter is weakness. The difference is subtle, but decisive. It is the difference between opening from your center and opening from your lack. And she reads that difference, not with logic, with her body, with her emotional system. A man once asked, "What do I do if she stops liking me after I show myself?" The answer is simple. Don't stop being attractive. Stop showing yourself like someone who is asking to be chosen. Show what is true, what is real, what you don't need validated. Then stop trying to control everything. Start reading. Read her rhythm. Read her pauses. Read how she shifts when you shift. Because desire does not follow the one who insists, desire follows the one who understands. After everything you've heard, you may be expecting a practical conclusion, a checklist, a list of steps, but that would repeat the same mistake. Because the problem was never technical. The problem was always structural. Most men look for external strategies to compensate for weak internal structure. So even if they memorize lines, dynamics, theories, their body keeps broadcasting the opposite, and what your body broadcasts is what the other person hears. That is why real attraction is not performed. It is embodied, not simulated, built from the inside. Machiavelli wrote for princes because he understood one thing. Power is not delegated. Power is held. And you do not hold a woman's respect with isolated actions. You hold it with who you are when you are not trying to hold anything. It is not what you do when everything is fine. It is how you behave when everything shakes, when you feel you could lose, when conflict appears, when silence appears, when contradiction appears. That is where your center is revealed. And that is where attraction is decided. That is where your structure is measured. And that structure is not built inside interaction. It is built before interaction. It is built when you demand more of yourself in solitude, when you make decisions for yourself, when you stop seeking validation just to exist. True power is not loud, it is felt. And it is felt because your presence does not depend on being welcomed. You are not there to be liked. You are there because you know who you are. And when she perceives that, she relaxes. Because the female body does not seek control, it seeks stability. And stability is not rigidity, it is direction. It is coherent emotional rhythm. That is when you treat her well, not from effort, but from center, from clarity, from emotional mastery. Machiavelli never spoke about relationships, but he left a brutal clue. Weapons are respected not for what they do, but for what they represent. You are that weapon. not to destroy, but for your capacity to hold yourself even when no one else does. Because when you are structure, you don't need to control the environment. You organize it with your presence, and that is noticed. Do you want to treat a woman well? Then become the kind of man who does not need to treat well to feel sufficient. Do not act from fear of losing her. Act from the certainty that you do not need to betray yourself to be desired. And this is not learned in a day. It is forged, trained, integrated. Imagine a piece of iron in a forge. It does not become a sword because it is decorated. It becomes a sword because it withstands fire, because it absorbs blows, because it does not break in the process. You are that iron. Every uncomfortable situation you face, every silence you hold, every boundary you set with respect, is a spark in your internal forge. Every time you surrender your direction to avoid discomfort, attraction dies a little. Every time you stop leading your energy because you're afraid of seeming harsh, you lose magnetism. Every time you prioritize her validation over your center, you give up your power. Treating well, in Machiavellian terms, would not mean flattering. It would mean leading with clarity, holding with firmness, remaining steady even when the environment does not celebrate you. Because real respect is not requested, it is imposed by structure. And when that structure exists, there is no need to act, you simply are. You are center, you are calm, you are rhythm, you are clarity, and desire appears, not because you chased it, but because your presence provoked it. That is the definitive shift, from the man who tries to be liked, to the man who knows he does not need to justify himself to be chosen. And when you understand that, when you no longer depend on approval, when you can hold yourself whole, even in tension, that is where true power begins.